Okay, I'm Krellin Stevens, and this is Out of the Silence with Qayden Stevens. So, I'm just going to go ahead and start asking my questions. Qayden is my son, so full disclosure. Okay, so tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what it was like growing up in the shadow of what happened to Qayden.
So I am Corellin's son. I'm the youngest of all of my three other siblings. I don't actually have a lot of memories growing up regarding Qadira. A lot of that is a big blur for me, but I do remember the stresses that it put on our family, especially all of the financial stress and the legal stress. That really got in the way of raising us as kids, I feel. As far as Qadira's injury goes, as long as I can remember, Qadira has had medical problems that have gotten in the way of just her living her regular life. So I would say that growing up in this house, it was very turbulent because there were always some kind of legal or financial problems getting in the way of us having normal lives as kids, you know. And especially after, I think when Qadira got burned, that caused a lot of social impact too, just on us kids going to school, going to Maplewood and going to Hayhurst. I would say, the years that I most remember the effects actually being like between 7 and like 9 years old, when I was old enough to start having memories of us even going downtown and protesting. I remember those first few protests and you guys hanging the sign. My parents, they hung the sign on the side of the house.
So, just for context, when Qadira, I think she was in the 6th grade at Robert Gray, we set up a website to try to just protest what had happened to her and try to just get some awareness about it. And we did hang a huge sign on the side of our house, and it had a picture of her leg. And actually, the Robert Gray school bus used to stop right in front of it. So it was probably really hard on all the kids in the neighborhood, not just my own kids. So, but continue, Qayden.
Yeah. So, as a kid, I definitely had some early psychological traumas going on too that really I do believe stemmed from just everything that this trauma, or this event, I suppose, or series of events caused the family. As a kid, I would go to school and I would be asleep a lot, and I think I would really just spend most of the day playing video games because of the difficulties around the house dealing with Qadira's injury.
So you were 2 years old when Qadira was burned. So when did you come to understand that that she had been the victim of a crime, or that she had been abused? Like when do you think that you finally began to understand that?
Like 2 years ago, when you guys started protesting. I didn't really think about it actually that much. It was all very confusing for me when I first started looking at the evidence. I was really of the opinion that you guys were crazy in some kind of way. It wasn't until I started looking a little harder and like actually trying to understand the legality of it that I did realize that something really terrible and tragic had gone on here. And the process of that definitely changed the way I felt about, everything that had gone on in the house and where we were at as a family. Those first early memories of looking at the evidence definitely changed my perspective on how this should be going.
So what do you think, what was that like for you growing up and like thinking that we were kind of crazy, or that, just I'm wondering how you processed that back then.
Well, I didn't really process it. I just spent most of my time playing video games. I remember there were times I'd be especially irritated at you guys if you guys were like drinking or something, or like, there was always like family living here, and, not everything was getting like taken care of, and, it was a very chaotic environment. When when I was in middle school, I remember the T-shirt experiment that you guys had me be part of.
That's actually was going to be my next question, because you started the T-shirt experiment in the 4th grade. So that was my question. What is the T-shirt experiment, and how has it affected your life? Because that we kind of started that as kind of a protest, you know.
Well,
but I don't know how you perceived it.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I really internalized it super well. I would wear the shirts every day in middle school, and actually elementary school too. And I remember a lot of kids coming up to me and asking me, you know, oh, what's that shirt about? It looks kind of cool, and people would make fun of me for wearing the same shirt every day. And
so wait, why don't you stop and kind of explain to the audience what the T-shirt experiment is, like, for somebody who has no idea, who isn't from Portland, who's never seen it.
Sure. So the T-shirt experiment involves the usage of T-shirts that say positive affirmations like "I am the value," "You are the value," "We are the value," and it comes from the group that you guys, my parents, created, the Pay It Forward Leadership, and the idea was that it was to create a group of people called Pay It Forward leaders who would wear these shirts that constantly and affirm people's value around them, so nobody would forget that, you know, hey, the person in front of you is a human being and they're valuable. And I think if this idea of the T-shirt experiment was to start a conversation around that and keep it as a constant conversation, sort of like how I learned, like, earlier today, like in India they have constant reminders of God and whatever, like that, it would almost be like a thought exercise. It's an exercise in thought and just changing negative thought patterns in the relationship to the way we look at people when we don't actually know them and they're just a human being in front of us we have no experiences with, how much we value them. So as a kid, that was all I really ever wore to school. That's all I ever wore out with friends. It wasn't until like late high school, I think or early high school, that I stopped wearing that.
The pandemic, actually.
Oh yeah, the pandemic. That's when I stopped.
The schools closed down. So.
Yeah, that's when I stopped wearing those shirts. And I never actually, I wouldn't say I really internalized those messages super well. However, I mean, I think I did come around to it, to appreciating the message a lot more when I got to be like 2 years ago, after I started reading about everything you guys had gone through. So it just added more context for it.
Right.
What's your next question?
Well, I'm trying to think, did I really cover everything there that I wanted to cover? Yeah, I think so. Maybe we'll come back to some of that too, because I guess I just wanted to add for the audience, when we started the T-shirt experiment, it was because we felt so small. We had been seeking, you know, an investigation for Qadira, a federal investigation, and, you know, nobody was helping us. So, you know, we came up with this idea of wearing these positive affirmations, and I have to say that I do believe it's really helped. But it sort of also kind of takes over your life a little bit, as you were saying. So I just wanted to add that. So when we started publicly protesting, you're saying you didn't really understand Qadira had been a crime victim until you really started going through the information. So when we started publicly protesting, how did you feel about that? How did you perceive the protest? How did your friends perceive it?
Well, you probably remember how I felt about it, because when I was down there, like, I was your first cameraman, and I would record everything you guys were doing, and I really didn't understand, like, the process of protesting. I didn't really understand what you were actually doing or why it was helping. I was just kind of there, and I would say I felt pretty embarrassed. That was the word I'd use. But it, you know, I mean, it was never like a super big issue for me at school. I never had really anybody bring it up. You know, I would mention that, oh, my parents protest from time to time. And as time went on and I learned more about actually what the protest was about and why it was set up the way it was, that started to change my perception on how it was supposed to affect change regarding Qadira. Mm-hmm. So eventually I got to a point where I was completely fine with them. And even, you know, actually ended up participating and running a few of them. So,
but how did it feel that, like, we never really got support? How do you think that impacted you?
I would say that it definitely reduced my faith in the local community a lot. I mean, you guys really did get out there every week. It kind of fell into becoming habit after a while. You guys would go to protest and then you'd come home, and I actually wouldn't really think that much of it. There are usually a lot bigger things like protest-wise going on that, usually caught the spotlight of like what's going on. But also at the same time, like I just wasn't paying attention. That's how I'd really describe it. I wasn't super invested in the protest. Or just the advocacy in general.
Do you feel like you just felt like we were never going to get anything figured out? So.
Well, I mean, I wasn't really focused on it. Like, I just wasn't thinking about it. I knew it was a thing. I just didn't have enough of a grasp on it to even understand where it could be taken. I just thought, oh, this is it. That's just what it is.
So, what was it like for you when we were charged with crimes?
Well, it definitely changed. It definitely immediately piqued my interest in the whole thing. It made me get curious about, why you would be being charged with such what I'd call pretty outrageous sentences. And it made me start digging deeper into your evidence. And that's when I actually started to get pretty angry. That's when I started to kind of feel like what you guys were feeling when you were protesting. Throughout the whole experience, it did feel super like an existential crisis, because it seemed very, very corrupt. Like, the entire process that was going on. The fact that those kind of charges could even be levied against people for just basic First Amendment rights. And what really, going into Multnomah Village and talking to some of those business owners who seemed, in a lot of ways, very indifferent, but also the fact that a lot of them didn't even seem to agree with those charges, it just made me wonder, like, who was really in control. So I started looking a lot deeper into the evidence and on the computer and stuff, and I was very shocked to see, from, Multnomah Village, a lot of this people in this area, even people who attended, like, BLM rallies, like, just talking about, like, just saying, like, just very mean and insulting things about this protest, completely downplaying Qadira's injuries. And that's when I really started to get very just generally concerned about the integrity of the area we were living in, because a lot of these people really did not have a good understanding of the story. And, I guess I'd define it as bigotry. That's kind of what I'd say.
Do you feel like you've experienced racism in Southwest Portland?
Not really. Not, like, to a point where I feel... I know our family has, and that's definitely affected me secondhand, but I don't feel like I've had anybody come up to me in a way that excludes me based on race. I've definitely gotten weird looks. Could definitely feel like I've been treated differently before, but I wouldn't say that I've experienced, like, nefarious levels of, like, racism or anything.
You feel like you've been pretty comfortable here.
Yeah, like, I don't think, like, the people around here are not, like, racist like that, not just like the everyday person.
So it's like some of the reactions that you started finding online towards justice for Qadira were surprising to you.
Yeah, I was not expecting those to be the reactions. And, I did actually find a lot of those to be pretty racist in nature, because, or at the very least, or I guess to be more specific, it was very arrogant. But, you could say racism. I prefer the word arrogance, because I just think there's deeper implications into what goes into making a racist environment and whatnot. But that's a different kind of topic. The point is that, a lot of the people had this understanding. It was very marginalizing toward our family, and nobody, and even all the way up to the final meeting between the DA and the MVBA, like Qadira would talk and she'd say like, "Oh, I was abused," and then just like here's like Tom Moore or Petey Farkas just like completely glossing over that fact. Nobody's even questioning the authorities.
So what did you think of, that kind of leads into another question of mine, is what did you just think of the entire court process? Because you joined us in the courtroom a lot and you kind of got to see firsthand, you know, how dismissive actually, you know, the judges were of what happened to Qadira.
It just looked really unprofessional and like a circus, in my opinion. It completely shattered my faith and belief in all the like preconceptions of the criminal, you know, quote unquote justice system. I mean, any experience we've had in court, especially reviewing the court documents, you know, that you guys have on file, and the anything to do with the law enforcement system, like it's very clear to me none of that stuff works the way that it's supposed to, and none of it gets the actual outcomes that it's supposed to. And that's one of the big things that really separated, you know, what happened to our family from people who, let's say, live in Multnomah Village, who've never really actually had to even have any real first-hand dealings with this kind of stuff or even see it for themselves. You know, a lot of people won't actually just go to a courtroom to just see what's actually happening in there, and not a lot of people try to understand it. So a lot of people just end up having a lot of fear around this system. And, you know, the thing about your protest is, you know, when I was on those sites looking at people talking about your protest, I recognized that a lot of them did not have any experience with this stuff, and they had no idea where you were coming from. And a lot of them were really, it wasn't even that they didn't like you, it's just that they liked their authorities so much that they couldn't even fathom, in many ways, a lot of people, like, first of all, any way to actually question them, and couldn't really fathom that some of them couldn't even fathom that this kind of thing could happen, which was kind of scary. So in the situation with Multnomah Village, what I saw was a lot of people looking at the protest and being like, "Oh, these crazy protesters, they're not getting anything done. You know, like, how are they gonna, like, they're not, like, petitioning people correctly or whatever." And the most interesting thing that is, looking through the evidence, I watched these neighbors, these business owners, you know, they were able to hold meetings, they were able to petition the noise ordinance office, they were able to get a meeting with the mayor, and this just all this creativity going into affecting change in society, but they wouldn't want to do it to assist the protest or to assist the advocacy.
But in terms of getting us charged.
Yeah, in terms of getting you guys charged, it was very simple. You know, that was like, it happened almost naturally. Mm-hmm. And when I went into Multnomah Village, one of the biggest things that I got when I was talking to a lady at the neighborhood house is, you know, I said, "Oh yeah, it was very unfortunate what happened to my parents." And she said, "No, it's not unfortunate. It's super targeted, and, you know, but we just didn't know what to do." But clearly they did, because what they did was what they did, and They knew to do that.
Yeah. I honestly, I have to say, I'm very confused as to why they don't support, you know, more openly support an investigation into what happened to Qadira. But I do think, you know, kind of bringing it back to my question is just like, really, how do you feel about law enforcement not investigating like this? Like, what would you want to say to law enforcement, you know?
Well, and that's the thing that kind of ties back into it. Like, the way I feel about law enforcement not investigating it is I feel like they are abusing their position of trust and authority in the people, or that people have for them, because there's no difference between the people, bystanders, and the protesters. It's just all one big group of people, but there is a big difference between the authorities and the people who allow them to have that power. Mm-hmm. And when I see that law enforcement's choosing not to investigate something that's obviously a crime, something that even I can look at just as like a recent graduate of high school or whatever, you know, just as a kid, you know, mm-hmm. I can look at and see, okay, you could definitely prosecute like 2 or 3 crimes just off a few pieces of evidence mm-hmm. here, and probably win in court. What I see is a lot of people who are believing in or allowing to and paying for detrimental services to society. Like, they're not doing anybody a service So it makes you wonder why what they're actually there to do. Like, what's they're in power for and who that actually benefits. Because there's no benefits from, poor responses to sex crimes or no responses.
Just crimes in general, I would say, actually.
Yeah, and when you look at the way they responded to you guys, I mean, law enforcement was all over it. I mean, they were basically trying to drum up as many false charges as possible. And, I mean, yeah, I know, like, people speaking the truth and whatnot usually get got by the mob, but, like, basically what you have is law enforcement playing devil's advocate. Like, they were going after people who were attempting to access their constitutional rights. They weren't going after people who were breaking the law that in a way that actually harmed society. I mean, speaking on an amp for like 30 minutes to an hour is nothing. It's
really just, I mean, it's actually, I mean, it's why we ended up winning the case. It's our First Amendment right, and we can do that. And I mean, I think encouraging civil discourse is a really important thing in society, and that's why we set the protest up the way we did. And also just knowing that it was just going to be the two of us, I thought that we put together something that was sustainable. So, and something we could do with little risk, to like you kids and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's why I actually got out there and I did start protesting with you guys, because the way that it was run, it was accessible to anybody who was just walking by. And that's why, when you look at a lot of the people who were complaining about it, I mean, first of all, there weren't even that many complaints, but other than that, I mean, a lot of them, what I've noticed is there's no credibility given to the protest. Like, everybody would just say, oh, we don't believe you, so this is therefore invalid,
And do you think that has to do with the fact, I mean, that law enforcement won't respond and we can't get media coverage, so it kind of makes it...
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that it also has to do with the fact that, a lot of the audience does not have to... A lot of people will never see the systems work so poorly like this, and a lot of them don't really know what to do in terms of actually getting stuff done on their own end, to work together to get the stuff moved in a different direction. Because
they don't actually know what's happening. That's kind of what you
there's
experiencing the system.
Well, yeah, and there's a propaganda campaign, essentially run by the city to insulate themselves from all these laws that they broke in this case, and insulate people who they are interested in protecting in favor of, or instead of defending civil rights and liberties, and to the fact that they'll even go after people trying to access their rights and their liberties. And I think that a lot of the misinformation and disinformation, comes as a tool to make sure that people don't understand what these protests are about and why they're important. And in doing so, it's unfortunate because through that blind faith and that blind trust, they get a lot of these citizens to just give up their rights, in in a very what's the word, like persuasive, covert fashion, in a way where they're the ones handing it over. They're just being basically tricked into doing it. It just didn't seem,
and it's just not beneficial for society. Society's kind of losing. One question I wanted to make sure I asked is, Qadira she's been, chronically ill and had a lot more medical problems just throughout the years since she was burned. And I just wanted to ask, what's it like growing up with with a sibling that has a chronic illness? Like, how was that for you? Do you feel like you were taking that in, or just trying to forget about it by playing video games as well? Like, that's another hardship, I think.
Yeah, I just mostly played video games. That was my main thing growing up. I mean, it wasn't until I started, taking it seriously that I actually put down the video games and started to understand just how ill Qadira actually is. and what she's dealing with and how much damage these people actually did to her. Growing up, watching, different like catastrophes happen, just with her physical health.
Because we had to pay a lot of attention to that. There was a lot of trauma in the household.
Yeah, there's been a lot of difficulty and a lot of hardship just between making sure that Qadir is okay, just the medical side of things. And that, I think it really inflames the attitude I have toward looking at hospitals and looking at officials, again, who, are trusted by society, trusted by the people who go to them for their services to deliver quality work, and watching them break their own codes of conduct, their own laws, their own rules, and the idea that they would look at you and knowing that they're lying to you, still lie to you and say, hey, this is okay, you're fine to do this, knowing that the consequences are very steep. It definitely changes the way I look at merit, because, a lot of these people, like Scott Kocher is a 5-star lawyer, but, very few people know about what he did in your case, and how he ran that whole, circus, essentially, around you guys without you knowing because you trusted him. Mm-hmm. And that's my biggest fear is for this community, is how many of these people have just complete trust and faith in these officials, who are willing to abuse that trust and abuse that faith. And it seems like it's just a complete endemic thing throughout the system. The law enforcement system, hospital system, anywhere power is there and people are being corrupted, nobody is really looking at, okay, how do we keep these people in check and hold them accountable?
Yeah. I think actually having a personal experience, like for all of you kids, having a chance to actually go into some of these courtrooms and have some of these meetings with the district attorney, and the fact that you did go into the village and talk to some of the business owners and other people up there about this, that experience when you're civilly engaged, how that can change the way you see, that inside structure. Because I'm willing to bet before you walked into the courtroom, you probably had a much better view of, what a judge is. You know what I'm saying?
But as soon as I saw Francis Sconey's reaction to Dad going pro se litigant, all my respect in the room was just lost, because of the way these people talk up their positions, like they are doing anything more than just reading and writing, because that's really all they're doing when you think about it. And they make it seem like it's really just one big attempt to completely demean and shame and scare you away from being engaged in any way, so you can just kind of get tossed around. And I think that shame and that self-deprecation is one of the big reasons why engagement was very difficult in our protest. And that was the one thing that differed from your guys' approach and my approach, is that I made a big point to make sure to let people know whenever I spoke that whatever they were accountable for, whatever they did, there was no shame in that. And if they wanted to come help, they could come help. That's why I didn't really use the amp when I went to Multnomah Village, because, the idea was I didn't really want to antagonize anybody, because it's not something to antagonize people over. End of the day, though, I did feel like the way the court system handled you guys was a big mistake. And I think that that's a blemish on just the entire court system here in Multnomah County, the civil and criminal side. And it definitely, over time, the more of these events go on and the more stories come out about it, people are going to lose faith in the legal system. And the legal system, that's going to be the death of attorneys in this country. Attorneys aren't going to, I really do predict that with the onset of AI, attorneys are not going to be able to find jobs. They're not going to be able to get contracts because...
Do you think that after watching us represent ourselves, do you think that's something that you think is a good thing? Do you think more people should be doing that?
Absolutely. I haven't represented myself, before. Hopefully I won't ever have to, but, or be in a position where I'd have to choose to do that. But yeah, seeing how many people, hearing so many stories of attorneys screwing over people, especially minorities, especially people who don't have access to a lot of resources and really have to go all in on this stuff. People who can't afford to, pull out millions of dollars to
appeal a case like some ridiculous number of times or whatever. That's really important.
And do you think, after watching us do it, it's a process that more people could learn?
Yeah, I think with good enough emotional control, you can pretty much go through this process. And I think you can do really well, I don't think it's actually impossible, and so it doesn't seem like you really need to go to school for 7 years.
It's reading and writing.
Yeah, it's reading and writing.
It's
just making an argument. I mean, if you've been a salesman before, you could probably step into the role and do okay, I watched Emily Cordy, I just watched her get up and just say irrelevant every single argument. That's all she ever said. She never said anything else. 7 years of law school to just get up and say one word and just say irrelevant, and the judge would accept that. And they wouldn't consider any of the rest of the story. So the way you're pigeonholed into this stuff, it's really actually a super petty system of rules a lot of the time. And the local government here did not even want to consider the laws they broke, but were willing to throw the book at you because it lined up with their agenda.
And how do you feel like, though, that did really, truly impact you? Because, you were going to go to school, you didn't last year, you're going to do it this year. But, I think there was some fear at first over here because it seemed heavy.
Well, yeah, it just seemed like I wasn't sure if that would be the best option at the time because, that would have been a serious economic blow to our family. And I probably would have been better off going to, somewhere I could work and, like a trade or something. And yeah, it did cause a lot of confusion in my mind. And it a lot of I think the biggest thing too was also beginning to feel very unwelcome and still feeling very unwelcome here in Portland because, what I've noticed is there are a lot of these signs up everywhere that say, Black Lives Matter, and those liberal signs that always say, all the slogans, on them. But as soon as something actually happens to you that involves being oppressed by the system in any kind of way, everybody just backs off. It becomes it's this really weird innuendo. I find it kind of Get Out, you're as a black person, it's almost like you're co-opted into a culture, it's almost like you're co-opted into white supremacy. If you as a thing are culturally appropriated, and you're kind of put on this pedestal, and you're enshrined in this very, sensual, emotional, what's the word? Well, it's just a very, oh, we understand your pain.
Yeah,
you have so much trauma.
Right.
Oh my gosh, look at this colored person who they created this artwork about how they were slaves. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's just so much. But they don't, all of that stuff I consider to really be really banal and shallow stuff. I really don't care if you feel sorry for me. I don't care if anybody feels sorry for you. What really matters is, are you gonna look at your system of government and are these people doing their jobs? And
right.
Is the law being fulfilled?
Right.
Are the technicalities of the matter actually working? It doesn't... I don't care if you think... You could... It doesn't... Here's the thing. You could think Black lives don't matter. You could be a completely racist person, but if you love the law and you love fulfilling the law, then it doesn't gonna matter if you're racist. Because, the hope is that you're going to... The idea is that you will... fulfill the law regardless of what's going on.
So there's a foundation, so a diverse group of people can come and live together because these rules and laws are being followed and people are actually trying to follow them, because that kind of gives us a level playing field if it's being used appropriately.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. And as a community, being able to actually come together and look at when authorities are abusing their power and saying, no, we're not going to do this. No, as a business association will figure out a way to advocate. We won't just complain to a government that, is already doing a fair amount of a terrible job, already engaging in the very practices we despise when we read history books. Yeah, sure. To reiterate, go ahead and put your BLM sign in front of your house. I'm not saying, don't have an emotions toward it. But end of the day, what are you going to be able to do, to actually engage with your authorities? Like, it's about engaging with the government, the authorities, I mean...
Or also engaging with that feeling, I would say, because it's very interesting, I would say, about Multnomah Village and just Portland in general, because you're right. I mean, we do have, a very liberal population, and it has not been lost on me that, for some reason, Portland, did support, George Floyd, and, we had these huge riots and protests and stuff, but yet, like, our protests, which started not long after that, like, just never gained any traction. And I guess, it has to do with, for me, I assume it has to do with the law enforcement's, reaction and just the fact that we just can't get any media. So
well, yeah,
psychological effects of that on the community.
They are, again, I mean, these people, a lot of them are being, misled and used and lied to. They're being lied to. And I do not, I don't hold it against them per se. Because a lot of them have fair and well-meaning intentions. And that's what all those signs in front of those homes represent to me. But end of the day, if you can have as many fair and well-meaning intentions as you want, but if you don't understand what you're doing and what's actually, what the context is for why you're having those feelings, and I mean, the way I see it, like the way people responded to the protests, a lot of them on Facebook, it's like, well, do you want the BLM sign in front of your house forever? Because the ideal future is that we don't need those signs in our houses.
Right.
That's the ideal future. And we're not going to get that future if nobody is willing to go to the government and address the way the government is handling citizens and the way the government is doing its job, because that's what we pay them for, is to fulfill these rules and laws and these procedures. And when they don't get fulfilled, I mean, it's not like working at Papa John's or something where, like, you forget to put pepperoni on a pizza. Like, we're talking about people's lives. And I do feel as the point of protesting is to be able for that to be felt on a broader scale by the entire community. Like, if the government messes up, like, that's something people should be able to feel. And if they don't feel it, then what's going to happen is a bunch of people are going to run into these similar circumstances, and everybody's just going to get hit by all these issues that aren't being resolved because nobody feels like it's their problem.
So, I wanted to get to the fact that you put together our website. And so that, I want to make sure I ask that question. So what was your process when it came to putting together the website? And, how do you feel about the project as it stands right now?
I think that the website is probably the best way to present evidence to the community, and that was something that I realized very quickly when I started trying to advocate for you guys on my own. With no repository of information, then there's no way to fight what the state is actually doing. So a repository of information that contains updates and all the good stuff, I thought would be probably the best weapon, for you guys to have. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a very useful service for anybody who's trying to get anything done socially, especially with a story as long and complex as ours. Putting together that website was designed to appeal to everybody in this area who were hoping for a different way to engage with it. Because ultimately, I mean, as much as I do want to rag on people for, critique people for the way they engage with it just naturally. Nobody is actually a natural at this thing. In fact, for most social revolutions, like, it's just kind of being made up as people go. Of course, it's actually very understandable that that lady did say she wouldn't really know what to do. I mean, a lot of the problems that are mentioned in our advocacy campaign are just so larger than life to most people. And again, most people feel like, oh, I'm just like a coffee shop worker, or I'm just like a toy store owner, or whatever, I'm not like a big time lawyer or whatever. Well, I mean, here's the truth. I mean, you don't have to be a big time lawyer. You don't have to be working in the court system. You don't have to be, super versed on this stuff. You just have to be an American citizen. You just have to be willing to access your rights. That's it. That's all you need. It's that simple. Being willing, able to put some creative effort into it, and you can start to make some effects and changes, to boost advocacy. I mean, we're not done. We're not really, I mean, we've come a long way. I think the biggest thing for people to understand is to know the story. That's it. Just to understand how this stuff actually works. The idea isn't that we stop all this stuff forever. It's that we arm people, no matter what economic status or background, cultural, racial they come from. It doesn't matter. Having an objective understanding of this is our system, these are our authorities, and this is what they're capable of. This is what they're truly capable of, and sometimes nobody's actually there, to look out. So in the future, when people do find themselves in these situations, they can be a lot more discerning. And when these problems do arise in communities like Multnomah Village, say, like, their approach to it is a lot different, and it looks more, it actually looks more understanding, than it really is. Because, I mean, one of the things I find rather embarrassing about the community is, or just like about America in general, is it expects a lot from people who are protesting. Like, it expects them to do it like the perfect government sanctioned way, like you have to do it the allowed way. And everybody stands there and, they get angry at people for trying to express all this trauma, and trying to actually, express their, protest the government like, you're supposed to. And nobody wants to get involved to actually alter these things. And what I actually really saw was an opportunity to take your protest and kind of make it something different, by bridging that gap between what a lot of the store owners wanted was like, oh, we just want a way to access the information differently. Now, a lot of people, I mean, there are a lot of people who use like a lot more like insulting and, sometimes foul language and whatnot. But, I mean, that's besides the point. I mean, there were people there who were just like, well, I don't really know how to engage. All right. And if I had something, then I would engage more.
So do you think overall that this community can come to an understanding and with this project, and what are your future goals for the project?
I think, yeah, the community definitely can come to an understanding about it, because I think what this project represents is a chance for the community, who apparently values, to me at least, apparently values the talking about racial concerns and talking about divides in America. They value those conversations, but I mean, when it comes to actually creating the actions, and when it comes to addressing something that's the real thing, like it's right in front of them, it's not brought to them by the TV, it's just brought to them in real life. This represents a chance to get some good, training, experience, how do you actually come together as a community to address wrongs committed against local citizens,
right?
In a way that's not like publicized on television for the first time when you hear it, in a way where it's just brought to you directly, and it's on you to leverage, every facet of your community to get it done, because that's really how it was done, like in the earlier ages of the civil rights movement, with the anti-Jim Crow laws. I mean, I remember like reading about like the Freedom Summer in Mississippi, and like how they would bus protesters into racist areas. This stuff was serious. Like, they trained like soldiers, like to get this stuff done. And a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to actually get out there, and protest. Like, people just spit on you for like no reason. Like,
well, I think when you do it in an unconventional way, and I think our protest looked really unconventional to people because it was just us, and because we did struggle so much to get support, because I think there's so much confusion with our story and a lot of misinformation being spread by people who are, are pretty high-ranking people, so I think that has been difficult to get around. So we really do, the website I think has been just critical, and I just appreciate your organization. I mean, that was definitely something that, me and Dad, with all of our trauma, just could not do. And just the ongoing trauma too makes it hard, I think, to even organize the information. So thank you.
Yeah, the goals for the website are really just to make sure that the information is continually uploaded onto the website, and that it remains something that the layman, the bystander, can understand, you know, as a story. I mean,
and how's that for you? Because I think for you, maybe one of the reasons you were able to organize it so well is because you were coming to understand the information, and then that kind of formed maybe that layout. Because it's just interesting for me to see how you put the website together, and I feel like it is so clear.
Well, it came as a final culmination of all the projects that I've done for you guys, like the original timeline and some of the presentations I made for your court case. And the website's not, I mean, it's not even close to being finished yet. You know, there's so much you could document about you and Dad's experiences in court, you know, as pro se litigants for most of the time, attempting to just be Americans accessing your rights and running into all of these professionals, basically just undercutting the system at every single turn. You know, like nobody respects it. Which defeats the whole purpose of the rules and laws in the first place.
Which it is, I have to say, like, I feel like it is a very good system. That's the one thing I can say, is I feel like it's a good system. I just don't feel like enough people know how to use it, because I think everybody needs to be using it for it to be working right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, nobody, like, legal stuff is not really taught to just your average person. You know, there's no emphasis on teaching, like, kids the law in school. There's no emphasis on teaching people, oh, this is how you navigate a courtroom. I mean, you might get, like, a mock trial, you know, in, like, high school or something. You might, or middle school, you might get... But a mock trial, I mean, doesn't even come close. I mean, I know it's a mock, but it's not near the circus that you really see going on sometimes. And I'm not saying every courtroom is bad. I'm just saying that based on my experience, the courtrooms I've seen here with this family have just been just utter and complete disappointments, you know, of the legal system.
I would second that. Yeah, I have not seen anything good of the legal system, and I think it's really unfortunate because, I mean, it'd be nice if it worked.
Because, I mean, ultimately, like, the idea is that it's supposed to be a system that brings us back to the original rules and laws for every event, for every incident, you know.
Mm-hmm. That
brings out justice in things, you know. But the failure, that there's so much failure on part of, and even independent, you know, entities like the DAs and what choices they choose to make. You know, which, like Mike Schmidt's decision to charge you guys instead of do anything for Kadira, or, you know, maybe perhaps even go after the people who actually harmed her, or try to hold any of those people accountable. You know, it's like, that's really, really poor quality work. Like, it's not, I mean, and you know, Mike Schmidt already has a problem with, you know, just not prosecuting anybody, you know, especially, you know, even in the protest community. Like, I mean, he had no issue prosecuting you guys, but I mean, you know, the people who, like, went into the PSU library, like, a lot of those people, you know, got off scot-free. And a lot of people who have damaged downtown have got off scot-free. I'm not saying that whatever people are protesting about is the issue. What I'm saying is, I mean, when you go down to methods of protesting, I mean, he was going after the least disturbing protest. This was like the most minimal irritation you could have. I mean, it's not like anybody in that area who didn't want to be around the protest was forced to be there, you know? I mean, you could do all manner of things. I mean, you could leave, come back later, you could put in earphones. I mean, you could just... There were people who couldn't even hear it, you know? I mean, even just being down the street. So, I mean, a lot of it is... I'd say a lot of it becomes as like an over-exaggeration. Like, people are sensitive to genuine reaches for justice in a local community, targeted at a local government level, which is the level you can have the most effect. Like, it's right there, you know.
And I think people were like that because, I mean, I guess primarily, you know, the government has communicated to them that nothing is going to be done about this. So I think that's probably part of their frustration as well.
And that is the biggest shame. Like, I mean, especially that final meeting with the MVBA, I mean, where Emily Cordy basically says to the business owners, like, yeah, this is on you guys to figure out. Like, well, what do we pay you for? I mean, like, why do they pay property taxes?
Right.
If the government's going to come in and say, yeah, this is a terrible situation, we know it's, like, emotionally fraught, and, if they get back out there and protest, it's just up to you guys. Like, that is not the point of a government. Like, the point is, I mean, we've invested all these resources. You're supposed to have... That's why all you people have to go to school to work in those positions, and you're going to come in here and just tell them, oh, we can't do anything for anybody in this situation, and we've wasted all your time and money on this, like, 11th month long... You guys were prosecuted for 11 months just to have the charges dismissed because, the state couldn't win. But, I mean, all of that, I mean, I just feel the whole point, going back to the website is to just document... It's just to document the way this stuff is going down.
So maybe in the future we can improve.
Yeah, that's the hope, that people are able, or at the very least that people can look back and, possibly identify where this fits into a potential pattern of behavior in the court system.
Right.
And maybe fix those patterns and discover places where this doesn't happen again and again and again. But, I mean, even if you look at, like... But these patterns, they go on, They go on, they really do. And if you look at Qadira's case... I mean, you'll find plenty of cases of children being abused, and it's reported to the police, and then nobody does anything, and the next thing you know, the kid's, dead or something.
Yeah, or damaged for life, like Qadira, and her health problems do continue. So that's always a concern, especially since we still haven't been able to get any investigation. So I guess I want to start wrapping it up, but I want to ask you, like, what are you doing this summer, and what are your plans, for the future, for the next year, to just kind of wrap up the interview?
Well, I mean, I'm going to the AmeriCorps for, like 2 months, around Oregon to do some environmental work, and then after that, it's through the Northeast Youth Corps, after that, I'm just going to go to PSU, and I was interested in their criminology and criminal justice degree because I'm curious about what they actually teach. Now, normally that's a degree, I think that's like more for going into law enforcement, and I am interested in how law enforcement also handles this stuff, and because the biggest thing about our case has always been, like, they never ever talked to any of these people. Like, they never went to Todd Burkholder and asked him any questions. They never questioned his family. They never talked to Rex Burkholder. Nothing. Not of the doctors. Never interrogated by any of the police. And it makes me wonder, why are the police so haphazard? That's the way, it's like... It's just not thorough, And I get there's limited resources, especially in Portland, because the leadership has done a very poor job, keeping the police effective here, keeping them, able-bodied and well-staffed and having resources to do their jobs effectively, because it is a difficult job. But, I mean, that's kind of my... And bringing our perspective to that degree would be... That field of study would be very enlightening, I'm sure.
I think so. I definitely agree. So I guess, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think we're good. Covered just about everything.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down and being one of my first interviews. And again, I just really appreciate all your help. And so thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.